Tuda, I caught my brother in bed with my fiancée. My family forgave them, so I ghosted. Now they're begging after a brutal karma destroys them. Text thumbnail, hook I caught my brother in bed with my fiancée. My family forgave them, so I ghosted. Now they're begging after a brutal karma destroys them. Part 1.1. The stepchild of hard work and the glorified leech. Target 700 words. This is a throwaway account disclaimer. Never thought I'd be one of those guys posting their life story on the internet, but here we are. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one. And yeah, it's pretty I, 27 male, grew up in Ohio in what looked like your typical middle-class family from the outside. But man, the dynamics in that house were something else entirely. My younger brother Kevin, 25 male, was mom's golden child since basically forever. You know those kids who can literally take a on the carpet and their mom would find a way to praise them for their creativity? That was Kevin. While I was busting my ass working construction with my uncle during the scorching Ohio summers starting at 16, Kevin got to focus on his artistic side. Basically, that meant smoking weed in the basement, sleeping until noon, and trying to become a freelance artist or a YouTube vlogger. Mom always had these perfectly crafted excuses ready for him. He's just finding himself, she'd say, or he's highly sensitive, David, he needs time to figure things out. Meanwhile, if I came home exhausted from a 12-hour shift pouring concrete and didn't immediately jump up to help with the dinner dishes, I was suddenly becoming lazy and needed to learn family responsibility. Don't get me wrong, I was still your typical hardworking kid in most ways. I paid my own way through college to get my civil engineering degree. I worked weekends, nights, holidays, doing whatever grunt work I could find to avoid drowning in student loans. Kevin, on the other hand, dropped out of community college after exactly 1.5 semesters. His excuse? The educational system was too restrictive for his creative spirit, or whatever excuse mom bought and paid for that week. She even bought him a car when he turned 21, despite him already totaling 2 other vehicles. I bought my own beat-up truck at 18 and maintained it myself. My dad, Arthur, was a quiet guy. He just kept his head down, went to work, came home and watched TV. He never intervened. He never stood up for me when Mom was berating me for not supporting my brother's dreams. He was completely passive, a ghost in his own house, which meant Mom ruled the roost, and her word was absolute law. By the time I was 25, I was making it work. I had decent grades, good friends, and landed a solid job at one of the bigger commercial construction companies in the state. I worked my way up quickly to an assistant project manager role. The pay was good, and I was making real money for my age. Plus, I got to work on actual buildings instead of being stuck behind a desk all day. I felt like all the dirt, the sweat, and the unfairness of my childhood were finally paying off. I was building a life, a real, tangible life that nobody could take away from me, or so I thought, because while I was out there grinding every single day to secure my future, the people I trusted most were perfectly content to live off my shadow, waiting for the perfect moment to tear my world apart. Part 1.2. The Promise of Tomorrow and the Red Flags. Target 700 words. That's around the time I met Jessica. She was doing her student teaching at an elementary school right next to one of our major job sites. I used to see her during my lunch breaks, sitting outside on the benches, grading papers or watching the kids during recess. One day, a stray baseball rolled over to our site, and I brought it back to her. We got talking, and man, I really thought she was different. She was beautiful, sure, but she also seemed so grounded. She was studying to be a teacher, loved kids, came from a good, respectable family, and was basically everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We started dating, and I fell hard. I wanted that traditional life. A house with a yard, a dog, a couple of kids, and a wife who would be my partner in everything. Mom absolutely loved Jessica from day one, which, looking back, should have been my absolute first red flag. Mom never liked anyone I brought around, but with Jessica, it was an instant obsession. She was always inviting her over for family dinners. Even on the nights when she knew I was working late at the site and couldn't make it, I'd come home exhausted, covered in dust, only to find Jessica and my brother Kevin sitting on the porch, drinking beers and laughing for hours. They'd spend entire evenings talking about indie movies, underground music, and art, things I didn't have the time or energy to care about because I was busting my ass trying to build us a future. "It's so nice that your fiancé and Kevin get along so well," Mom would say, beaming at them from the kitchen window like she'd personally arranged the match. "They just have the same creative souls, David. You should be happy they can connect on that level." After 2.5 years together, I proposed. I had worked 70-hour weeks for 6 months straight just to afford the ring she had been hinting at. I took her to a nice restaurant downtown, got down on one knee, and asked her to be my wife. She cried. She said yes, and I really thought I had it all figured out. We started planning the wedding, putting money away into a joint savings account. I was working harder than ever, taking every overtime shift available, completely blinded by the dream I was chasing. God, the signs were all there, weren't they? Looking back now, it makes me sick to my stomach how blind I was. I missed how she'd always find excuses to hang out at my parents' place on Saturdays when I was at the site. I missed how she and Kevin had all these inside jokes that I was never a part of. I missed how, during family dinners, they would casually finish each other's sentences. I remember this one specific time, about a month before everything blew up. We were all at the dinner table. Jessica was telling a story about a music festival, and Kevin chimed in with a detail she forgot. They locked eyes and laughed. This deep, intimate laugh. Mom sat there with this weird, satisfied, knowing smile on her face. Dad just stared at his mashed potatoes. I was too busy mentally calculating the cost of our roofing materials for the next day to notice that my entire life was a __ joke. Part 1.3. The grim May afternoon. The door to hell opens. Target: 800 words. Here is where the nightmare actually begins. It was a Tuesday afternoon in May. I remember the weather perfectly. It was unseasonably warm. A beautiful, clear day. We were supposed to pour the foundation for a massive new commercial complex, but our supplier completely _ up the delivery schedule. The cement trucks weren't coming until the next morning. My foreman told me to take the rest of the afternoon off since there was nothing we could do. Normally, I would have stayed in the trailer and caught up on my endless mountain of paperwork, but I thought, hey, I've been neglecting Jessica lately. I'll surprise her. I stopped by a florist, bought her favorite hydrangeas, and drove home around 2 p.m. I pulled onto our street and immediately saw Kevin's beat-up Honda Civic parked in the driveway of the townhouse Jessica and I rented. That piece of __ car that Mom was still paying the insurance on. I should have known something was up right then. Kevin was supposed to be working on his portfolio at Mom's house. But my naive brain just figured he dropped by to borrow something, or maybe Mom sent him over with some food. The front door was unlocked. The house was quiet, except for music coming from upstairs. It wasn't just any music. It was our song. The song I had proposed to her to. __ Ironic, right? I walked in, holding the flowers, and looked up the staircase. There were clothes scattered on the steps. A pair of Kevin's ratty vintage Converse. Jessica's cardigan. Pair of jeans. You know that moment in movies where all the ambient sound drops out, and all you can hear is the rushing of your own blood in your ears? Time literally slowed down. I stood there, staring at that cardigan, the one I had bought her for her birthday, lying there on the carpet like a fan sign pointing to the bedroom. I walked up the stairs. Every step felt like I was moving underwater. I didn't want to open the door, but I had to. I pushed the bedroom door open. I'm not going to describe the exact visual of what I saw. You can use your imagination. But it was raw, it was unmistakable, and it was happening in the bed I had paid for, under the roof I was breaking my back to keep over her head. But here's the part that really broke something inside my brain. They didn't even notice me at first. They were completely lost in each other. When Kevin finally turned his head and saw me standing there, the hydrangeas dropping from my hand to the floor, he didn't scream. He didn't scramble in a panic. He actually had the balls to look at me, sigh, and say, "Oh, bro," like he had just accidentally spilled a beer on my favorite rug. Like it was a mild inconvenience. Jessica shrieked. She immediately started crying, violently yanking the bedsheets around her naked body, scrambling backwards against the headboard. David! Oh God! David! Oh my God! Please! She kept repeating it over and over like a broken record. I didn't yell. I didn't charge at him with my fists, even though every primal instinct in my body was screaming at me to beat him until my knuckles bled. I just stood there, completely numb, staring at the two of them. How long? My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was cold, dead. Jessica was hyperventilating, sobbing into her hands. Kevin just sat there, looking away, scratching the back of his neck. I asked, "How long?" I repeated, stepping into the room. Jessica looked up at me, mascara running down her face, her eyes wide with terror. David, please. It meant nothing. It just happened. How long? I finally roared, the walls practically shaking. She flinched. 2.5 years. 2.5 years. Almost the entire time we had been together. Every time I took a Saturday shift. Every time I worked a holiday. Every time she told me she was going over to my parents' house to help Mom with the garden. She was with him. My own brother. Part 1.4. A stab in the back. The cruel complicity. Target. 800 words. I told them they had exactly 10 minutes to get dressed and get the out of my house before I called the cops and reported a trespasser. I walked downstairs, went into the kitchen, and stared at the wall. 10 minutes later, I heard them scurry down the stairs and out the front door. I immediately called a locksmith. You'd think the betrayal of catching your fiancé and your brother would be the worst part of the story. You'd be wrong. The real nightmare was just beginning. After changing the locks, I packed all of Jessica's immediate belongings into trash bags and threw them on the porch. I shut my phone off for 2 days. I drank half a bottle of whiskey and just sat in the dark. When I finally turned my phone back on, I had dozens of missed calls and texts, but not apologies. I found out later from my Aunt Helen, the only sane person in my family, what happened that afternoon. Jessica and Kevin hadn't gone to a hotel. They drove straight to my parents' house. Jessica ran into the living room, threw herself on the floor, and confessed everything to my mother through hysterical tears. And what did my mother do? Did she throw her out? Did she scream at her son for betraying his own flesh and blood? No. My mother sat down on the floor, pulled the woman who had just shattered my life into a warm embrace, and stroked her hair. She told Jessica to breathe. She looked at Kevin, who was standing there looking sorry for himself, and she actually smiled a sad, pathetic little smile. God works in mysterious ways, my mother told them. Sometimes the heart wants what it wants, and we can't fight destiny. She made them tea. She cooked them a roast dinner. My mother made my cheating fiancé a warm meal on the exact same day I caught her for my brother. By the end of the week, Mom had helped Jessica move the rest of her belongings out of our townhouse while I was at work. But she didn't move Jessica back to her parents' house. Oh no. Mom moved Jessica directly into Kevin's room, which used to be my old bedroom. They were sleeping together under my parents' roof, with my mother's absolute blessing. When I finally stormed over to my parents' house to confront them, it was like walking into an alternate dimension. I walked into the kitchen, and there they were. Mom was making pancakes. Kevin and Jessica were sitting at the table, drinking coffee, looking like a perfectly happy little suburban couple. What the undersurfer is going on here? I demanded, my hands shaking with rage. Mom turned around, wiped her hands on her apron, and gave me this look of profound disappointment. David, lower your voice. There's no need for hostility. Hostility? He slept with my fiancée for 2 years. And you moved her into my old room. David, you need to understand, Mom said, using her soft, patronizing voice. Kevin and Jessica share a very special connection, a deep, artistic bond. You were always so focused on your career, your money, your buildings. You never truly saw Jessica. You never nurtured her soul. Kevin did. They didn't mean to hurt you, but true love can't be denied. I looked at my dad, Arthur. He was sitting in his recliner in the next room, pretending to read the newspaper. Dad? Are you seriously going to sit there and let this happen? He didn't even look up. He just mumbled, "Listen to your mother, David. We just want peace in the house." They had rewritten history. In their twisted minds, I was the cold, neglectful, workaholic villain who stood in the way of a beautiful, tragic romance. I was the bad guy for being upset. Part 1.5 Knew the fatal blow to the breadwinner. Target 1,000 words. I left that house vowing never to return, but I still had logistical nightmares to untangle. The townhouse, the bills, the wedding deposits. The most pressing issue was our joint savings account. I had been depositing almost all my overtime pay into it for a year and a half. There was about $12,000 in there, meant for the catering, the venue, and the honeymoon. I took a Monday morning off to go to the bank to freeze the account and transfer my portion out. I sat down with the teller, handed over my ID, and asked for the balance. "Sir, the current balance is $42.16, she said politely. I stared at her. "Excuse me? There should be over $12,000 in that account." She clicked her mouse a few times. "There was a withdrawal made in person last Thursday by the joint account holder, Jessica, last name. She withdrew $11,950 via a cashier's check." My blood ran ice cold. She had stolen it. She had completely cleaned out the wedding fund that I had built. I felt dizzy. I walked out of the bank, my vision blurring, and immediately drove to my parents' house. I didn't knock. I kicked the front door open so hard the frame splintered. "Jessica!" I roared. Mom came rushing out of the kitchen, looking terrified. "David, have you lost your mind? Where is she? Where is the thief?" "They aren't here," Mom said, crossing her arms defensively. "They left yesterday for a trip to California. They needed some time away to heal from all the stress and negativity you've been causing. With my money, she stole 12 grand from my bank account to take my brother on a vacation." Mom didn't even flinch. She actually looked annoyed. "David, stop being so dramatic. It was a joint account. Technically, she had a right to it. Besides, Kevin has been having terrible anxiety attacks because of how aggressive you've been. They needed a healing trip. Consider it your contribution to helping your brother find peace." I was so disgusted I couldn't even speak. I turned around and walked out, but the universe wasn't done destroying me yet. I drove back to my townhouse. I needed to get my work gear together for the next day. I parked in the driveway and walked around to the back of my truck. My job required me to provide my own specialized tools, high-end DeWalt laser levels, Makita power tools, heavy-duty surveying equipment, specialized concrete vibrators. It took me 5 years to build that collection. It was worth easily $15,000. It was my livelihood. Without those tools, I couldn't do my job as a project manager. The heavy-duty steel lockbox bolted to the bed of my truck was wide open. The padlock hadn't been cut. It had been opened with a key. I looked inside. Empty. Every single tool. Every battery. Every case. Gone. I frantically patted my pockets. My spare truck keys, which I always kept in a small bowl by the front door of the townhouse. They were missing. Jessica still had a key to the house before I changed the locks, but she didn't have the truck keys. Only one other person knew where I kept my spare keys. My mother. She used to water my plants when I was out of town. I drove straight back to my parents' house. I cornered my mother in the hallway. "Where are my tools?" I demanded, backing her against the wall. She turned pale, but then her face hardened into that self-righteous mask she always wore. "I don't know what you're talking about. Do not lie to me. You took my spare key. You and Kevin stole my tools. Where are they?" She pushed past me, her voice trembling but arrogant. "Kevin needed some capital, David. He found a gallery in Los Angeles that might feature his art, but he needed travel money and submission fees. You have a great job, you have excellent credit. You can just buy new tools. Kevin doesn't have your advantages. You've always been so selfish with your money." I felt my knees almost give out. My own mother. My own flesh and blood. She had orchestrated the theft of my livelihood to fund a romantic getaway for the brother who betrayed me and the woman who broke my heart. They had literally stolen my ability to earn a living, pushing me into massive credit card debt just so they could go play artist on the beach. "You're a monster," I whispered. "You're a sick, twisted monster. I am a mother trying to level the playing field for her children," she screamed back. "You will not speak to me that way. You are strong, David. You will survive. Kevin needs this more than you do." I walked away. I didn't report them to the police. I had no solid proof, no cameras, and Mom would just lie and say I gave Kevin the tools. I was completely broken. I had to max out 2 credit cards the next day just to buy enough basic equipment to keep my job, burying myself in debt while they were sipping margaritas in California on my dime. Part 1.6. The Last Straw at Easter and the Escape. Target. 1,000 words. The next few months were a blur of absolute misery. I worked, I slept, I paid off debt. I lived like a ghost. I tried to just ignore their existence, but my mother wouldn't let me. She relentlessly bombarded me with texts, emails, and voicemails, demanding that I attend the upcoming Easter Sunday dinner. "It's time to let go of this toxic anger, David. Family is family. You need to be the bigger person." I don't know why I went. Maybe a sick part of me wanted to see if there was any shred of humanity left in them. Maybe I just wanted closure. So, on Easter Sunday, I drove to that house one last time. I walked into the dining room. The table was beautifully set. Dad was carving a ham. And there they were, Kevin and Jessica sitting side by side, holding hands. They looked tanned, happy, and completely unapologetic. But that wasn't what made my blood boil. As I sat down across from them, the light caught something around Jessica's neck. It was a diamond pendant. A very expensive, custom-made diamond pendant. Kevin caught me looking at it. He smirked. "Like it, bro? Got it for her in LA. Figured she deserved something special after all the drama. He bought it with my money. The money I bled for. He was sitting there, wearing designer clothes, buying diamonds with the cash they stole from me, in the house my parents paid for. Before I could even process the rage, Mom clapped her hands together, her face glowing with manufactured joy. "Attention, everyone. Since we are all finally together, I have a wonderful announcement. I've invited Jessica's parents to join us for dessert today, because Kevin and Jessica are officially getting engaged. We're going to start planning the wedding." The room went dead silent. Even Dad stopped carving the ham. Jessica looked down, blushing coyly. Kevin grinned like he had just won the lottery. Mom was staring at me, waiting for my reaction. She was practically begging me to explode so she could play the victim again. She wanted me to scream so she could point and say, "See? Look how unstable and angry David is. We had to do this." But the anger didn't come. Instead, a wave of absolute, freezing cold clarity washed over me. I saw them for exactly what they were. Parasites, leeches, sick, twisted people who fed off my misery to fuel their own delusions. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I just stood up. I calmly picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. "David, where are you going? We haven't even had dessert," Mom said, her voice dropping a little, confused by my silence. I looked at her. I looked at Kevin. I looked at Jessica. "I'm going to let you enjoy the life you bought with my money," I said quietly, "because it's the last thing you will ever get from me." I walked out the door and never looked back. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office. I knew the company was opening a massive new division down in Florida, and they were desperate for experienced project managers to lead the expansion. "I want the Florida transfer," I told him, "and I want it immediately." My boss, who knew a little bit about what I was going through, didn't ask questions. "How soon can you pack?" "I can be on the road by Friday." I spent the next 4 days executing a masterclass in disappearing. I broke the lease on my townhouse and paid the penalty in cash. I sold everything I couldn't fit into the back of my pickup truck. I went to a completely different bank, closed my remaining accounts, and transferred my funds. I drove to a different carrier, bought a new phone, and changed my number. I deleted every single social media account I had. I didn't tell a soul. Not my aunts, not my cousins, not my friends who might accidentally leak information to my mother. I became a ghost. Friday morning, at 3 a.m., the air was bitterly cold. I stood in the empty driveway of my Ohio townhouse. The bed of my truck was loaded with my new tools, some clothes, and that was it. Everything else I left behind. I threw my phone, the old one that was tied to their family plan, into a dumpster behind a gas station. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out onto the highway. As I drove south, watching the sun come up over the horizon, the heavy, suffocating weight that had been crushing my chest for the last year finally started to lift. I was leaving the poison behind. I was free, but I had no idea that the universe was already setting the stage for the most brutal, spectacular karma I could ever imagine. Part 2.1. The Phoenix Rising from the Florida Ashes. Target: 700 words. The drive to Florida was 1,000 miles of pure, unadulterated silence. I didn't turn on the radio once. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt, watching the freezing Ohio gray slowly bleed into the vibrant, humid green of the South. When I crossed the state line into Florida, I rolled down the windows and let the heavy, salt-tinged air hit my face. It felt like breathing for the first time in a year. I was 1,000 miles away from the toxicity, the manipulation, and the people who wore my exhaustion like a badge of honor for their own twisted narrative. Starting over wasn't easy, but when you're used to carrying the weight of an entire family's expectations on your back, carrying just your own is a breeze. I threw myself into my work with a vengeance. The Florida division of my company was booming, picking up massive commercial contracts left and right. Since I didn't have a personal life to distract me, I practically lived at the job sites. I was the first one there at 5 a.m., drinking black coffee in the humid dark, and the last one to lock up the gates at night. My bosses noticed. When you show up, shut up, and produce results, people respect you. Within 8 months, I was promoted from an assistant to a full-fledged project manager, overseeing multi-million-dollar developments. With the promotion came a significant pay bump. The first thing I did was pay off the suffocating credit card debt I had to take on when my mother and brother stole my tools. The second thing I did was walk into a Ford dealership and buy myself a brand new F-250 Super Duty, straight off the lot, paid in full. It was the exact kind of truck Kevin used to drool over but could never afford because, artists don't conform to capitalist structures. Every time I started that engine, it felt like a tiny victory. But the anger was still there. It lived in my chest like a coiled snake, tightening every time my mind drifted back to that May afternoon in my bedroom. I needed an outlet before the rage ate me alive, so I joined a local MMA gym. I spent my evenings hitting the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw, sparring with guys twice my size, learning how to take a hit and keep moving forward. It was exactly what I needed. It grounded me. It taught me discipline, control, and how to weaponize my anger instead of letting it control me. Finally, I was sleeping through the night. No more waking up in a cold sweat. No more phantom sounds of my engagement song playing in my head. Of course, Mom couldn't stand the radio silence. I had changed my number and blocked everything, but she was relentless. She started creating fake Facebook and Instagram accounts just to stalk me. I'd get these bizarre messages from accounts with names like sunshine_florals_1960 or blessed mama_88. The messages were always the same predictable garbage. David, we miss you so much. Kevin is doing so well with his art, but he feels the void of his older brother. Please come home. A family shouldn't be broken over a mistake. She never acknowledged the theft. She never acknowledged the betrayal. In her mind, I was just throwing a childish tantrum. I didn't engage. I didn't reply. I just hit block and went about my day, building my buildings, driving my truck, living my life. I thought I had built an impenetrable fortress around myself. I thought I was completely safe from their madness. I was dead wrong. Part 2.2. The masterpiece of manipulation. The cancer card. Target. 800 words. It was a Tuesday in late October. I was in my site trailer, reviewing structural blueprints, when my phone buzzed. It was an Ohio area code. I almost hit decline, assuming it was another one of Mom's flying monkeys, but something told me to answer. It was my Aunt Helen, Mom's older sister and historically, the only person in that entire bloodline who actually possessed a functional moral compass. The second I put the phone to my ear, I knew something was horribly wrong. Aunt Helen was sobbing, not just crying, but unleashing these deep, ragged, hyperventilating sobs that chill you to the bone. Helen? Aunt Helen, what's wrong? Are you okay? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. David! She choked out, her voice trembling violently. Oh God, David. It's your mother. All the anger, all the resentment, all the hatred I had built up over the last year vanished in a millisecond. That's the sick thing about family. No matter what they do to you, that primal wire is still connected. What happened? She has cancer, David. Breast cancer. It's stage 4. The doctors said it's metastasized to her bones. They gave her 2 months, maybe less. She's rapidly declining. I felt the blood drain from my face. The blueprints on my desk blurred. She wants to see you, Aunt Helen cried. She's begging for you. She says she can't leave this earth with this bad blood between you. Please, David. I know what she did was unforgivable, but she's dying. Please come home. I didn't even think. I didn't question it. You don't question a stage 4 cancer diagnosis delivered by a hysterical relative. I hung up the phone, walked out to my foreman, handed him the clipboard, and told him I had a family emergency. I drove straight to the airport, bought the first available ticket to Ohio at the counter, and boarded a plane with nothing but a carry-on bag containing a black suit. I packed a funeral suit because I genuinely thought I was going home to bury my mother. The entire flight, I was in turmoil. I stared out the window at the clouds, warring with myself. Could I forgive her? Could I stand by her deathbed and hold the hand of the woman who orchestrated the theft of my livelihood and sheltered the people who broke my heart? By the time the plane touched down in the freezing Ohio rain, I had convinced myself that I had to. She was dying. Death is the ultimate equalizer. I would say my piece, grant her peace, and close that chapter forever. I took a rental car straight from the airport to my parents' house. The driveway was packed with cars. I recognized Aunt Helen's sedan, Kevin's piece of dash, a Civic, and a few others. I assumed the family had gathered for a vigil, or maybe she was on hospice care in the living room. I put on my black suit jacket, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door. I didn't knock. I just turned the knob and walked in. I expected the sterile smell of medical equipment, the hushed whispers of mourning relatives, and the dim lighting of a sick room. Instead, I was hit with the smell of roasted garlic, the loud popping of a champagne cork, and upbeat music playing from the stereo. I stepped into the dining room, and my brain completely short-circuited. There was no hospital bed. There were no 4 drips. There was no hospice nurse. Standing at the head of the table, wearing a sparkling cocktail dress, looking completely vibrant, healthy, and flush with life, was my mother. Beside her stood Kevin, wearing a ridiculous velvet blazer, holding up a glass of champagne. And next to him was Jessica, flashing a massive diamond ring on her left hand. The room went dead silent as they saw me standing in the doorway in my funeral suit. Mom gasped, but it wasn't a gasp of surprise. It was a theatrical, practiced gasp. She immediately plastered on a watery, emotional smile and took a step toward me with her arms open wide. David! Oh, my beautiful boy! You came home! I stepped back, my eyes darting frantically around the room. Aunt Helen was sitting in the corner, looking down at her lap, refusing to meet my eyes. What is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Where are the doctors? Aunt Helen said. She said. Mom stopped, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she morphed her expression into one of profound, motherly sacrifice. David, honey, please understand. We were desperate. You wouldn't answer my calls. You wouldn't read my letters. Kevin and Jessica are officially tying the knot next month, and I couldn't bear the thought of our family being fractured for such a joyous occasion. I had to do something drastic to get you in a room with us so we could heal. She faked it. She faked terminal cancer. She made her own sister believe she was dying, just to manipulate me into attending her golden boy's engagement party. The silence in the room was deafening. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Bro, come on. It's just a little white lie. Have a drink. Let's just squash the beef. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. I saw the pure, unadulterated rot inside her soul. There was no love there. There was only control. You cursed your own life, I said, my voice eerily calm, resonating through the silent room. You faked a terminal illness. You made me pack a funeral suit to bury you, just to force me to look at these two pieces of garbage. David, don't use that language. Mom snapped, her true colors instantly flashing. I am your mother. I did what I had to do to save this family. You are being entirely too dramatic about this. You're dead to me, I said. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of absolute, undeniable fact. From this second forward, as far as I am concerned, you actually died today. Do not ever contact me again. I turned on my heel and walked out the door. I heard Mom start wailing behind me, her real, ugly cry this time, realizing her ultimate manipulation had just nuked the bridge permanently. I got back in my rental car, drove back to the airport, and flew back to Florida. I didn't shed a single tear. You don't cry over a corpse that's still breathing. Part 2.3. The Ghosts of Family and the Arrival of Clara. Target. 800 words. Returning to Florida after the cancer stunt changed me. I became hypervigilant, paranoid, and utterly closed off. I threw myself even deeper into my work and my MMA training. I built walls so high and thick that nobody could even see the top of them. I assumed everyone had an ulterior motive. I assumed every kindness was a trap. Then, about 6 months later, I met Clara. I tore my rotator cuff sparring at the gym and had to spend a few weeks doing physical therapy. Clara was one of the nurses at the clinic. She was sweet, soft-spoken, and incredibly patient. She had this calming aura about her that just naturally disarmed people. We started chatting during my sessions. She laughed at my terrible jokes, and I found myself actually looking forward to the agonizing shoulder exercises just to see her. Eventually, I asked her out to dinner. She said yes, and things moved surprisingly fast. Clara was the polar opposite of Jessica. Where Jessica was always concerned with appearances and status, Clara was earthy and compassionate. She loved animals, volunteered at shelters, and baked cookies for her coworkers. She seemed safe. We started dating exclusively. I opened up to her little by little. I told her about my job, my ambitions, and eventually, the very abridged version of why I lived 1,000 miles away from my hometown. I told her my family was toxic, that they had betrayed me in unforgivable ways, and that I was strictly no contact with all of them. That must be so painful for you, Clara had said, holding my hand across the table at a seafood restaurant. Family is supposed to be your safe harbor. I can't imagine not having my parents in my life. It's better this way, I told her firmly. They're a cancer. I cut them out and I survived. She nodded, her eyes full of sympathy, and I thought she understood. I thought she respected my boundaries. But as the months went on, I started noticing small, seemingly innocent things. Red flags that my trauma-wired brain picked up on, but my desperate desire for normalcy tried to ignore. Clara asked a lot of questions. Too many questions. She would casually bring up my brother, asking what kind of art he did. She would ask about my mother's hobbies. One evening, I walked out of the shower and caught Clara standing by my kitchen island, staring intently at the screen of my open laptop. When I cleared my throat, she jumped, quickly clicking over to a recipe website. Just looking for something to cook for dinner, she stammered, her cheeks flushed. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night to find her out on the balcony, speaking in hushed, urgent tones on her cell phone. When I slid the glass door open, she immediately hung up. Just my mom, she said quickly. She couldn't sleep. Clara had a fixer personality. She believed that love could conquer all, that communication could solve any dispute, and that no family was ever truly broken beyond repair. She grew up in a perfect, supportive household where the biggest conflict was who burned the Thanksgiving turkey. She had no concept of true malice. She had no idea what a narcissistic mother was capable of. And that naivety was about to blow my life up all over again. Part 2.4. The Christmas Eve Betrayal. Target. 900 words. We had been dating for just over a year when the holidays rolled around. Clara invited me to spend Christmas with her family at their large estate in Naples, a couple of hours south of my place. I agreed. I was actually looking forward to it. Her parents were great people. Her dad was a retired architect who loved talking shop with me, and her mom treated me like a second son. It felt like I was finally getting a taste of the normal, healthy family dynamic I had always craved. Christmas Eve was picture perfect. The house was decorated to the nines. A massive fire was roaring in the fireplace, and the smell of roasted duck filled the air. We drank wine, exchanged stories, and laughed. For a few hours, the ghosts of Ohio were completely silent. I felt genuinely happy. Around 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. "Oh, that must be the carolers," Clara's mother said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Clara, honey, go get the door." Clara stood up, but she didn't look excited. She looked terrified. She shot me this wide-eyed, guilty look, her hands visibly shaking as she walked toward the grand entryway. "Everything okay?" I asked, standing up, my instincts instantly flaring. Clara opened the heavy oak door. Standing on the porch, bundled up in winter coats, looking entirely out of place in the balmy Florida evening, was the nightmare I thought I had buried. My mother, Martha. My father, Arthur. My brother, Kevin. And Jessica. My entire body locked up. The blood roared in my ears so loudly I thought I was going to pass out. For a split second, I genuinely thought I was having a hallucination. "Surprise?" Mom said, stepping into the foyer, peeling off her gloves. She looked past Clara and locked eyes with me. She wore that same sickeningly sweet, victorious smile she had the day she told me Kevin and Jessica were getting married. I looked at Clara. She was crying, wringing her hands together. "David, please don't be mad. Just listen to them. Please." The realization hit me like a freight train. The questions, the hushed phone calls, snooping on my laptop. Clara had betrayed me. She had found my mother on Facebook. They had been talking behind my back for months. My mother had played Clara like a cheap fiddle. She had fed Clara a sob story about a heartbroken, misunderstood mother who just wanted to heal her fractured family. She painted herself as the victim of a stubborn, angry son who was running away from his problems. And Clara, the naive little fixer who wanted to orchestrate a Christmas miracle, bought it hook, line, and sinker. She had given them my location. She had coordinated this ambush. "David, darling," Mom said, taking a step forward, her voice dripping with manufactured emotion for the benefit of Clara's parents, who were now standing in the hallway looking utterly confused. "It's Christmas, a time for forgiveness. We flew all the way down here because we refused to let this family remain broken. We love you. We want you back in our lives." Kevin chimed in, leaning against the doorframe, trying to look casual. "Yeah, bro. Come on. It's been over 2 years. You've made your point. Let's just drop the tough guy act and hug it out." Jessica stood behind him, looking nervously at the floor, clutching a designer handbag I'm sure Kevin bought with whatever was left of my stolen money. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. The anger I felt was so absolute, so pure, it went completely cold. I looked at my mother. "You are trespassing. Get out." "David," Clara sobbed, stepping toward me. "Please. I did this for you. You're holding on to so much pain. I just wanted to help you heal. Your mother loves you. They all made mistakes, but you have to forgive them." I turned my gaze to Clara, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had let my guard down for. She looked identical to my mother in that moment. Manipulative, boundary-stomping, arrogant enough to think she knew what was best for me. "You didn't do this for me," I said, my voice dead and flat. "You did this to satisfy your own savior complex. I told you exactly who these people were. and you decided you knew better. David, please. We are done, I said to Clara. I didn't blink. I didn't waver. You and I are completely, permanently done. I turned to her parents, who looked horrified. Thank you for your hospitality. I apologize for the disruption. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack. I walked straight past my mother, shouldering Kevin out of the doorway so hard he stumbled backward onto the porch. David! Mom shrieked, dropping the sweet act instantly. You get back here. You do not walk away from your family on Christmas Eve. We are your blood. You owe us respect. I didn't even look back. I walked to my F-250, unlocked the doors, and climbed in. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw them standing on the lawn in the rearview mirror. My mother screaming, Clara sobbing into her hands, Kevin looking like the pathetic loser he was. I drove away into the Florida night, feeling nothing but a strange, liberating emptiness. I had survived them once. I could survive them again. But this time I was completely immune. Part 2.5. The Hurricane of Karma. Target 1,000 words. They say the wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. I just didn't expect to have a front row seat when the universe finally decided to collect its debts. 2 years after the Christmas Eve ambush, I was sitting in my corner office at the construction firm. I was now a senior regional director. We had just won a massive government contract to demolish and clear out several dozen foreclosed, dilapidated properties across the Midwest to make way for a new commercial infrastructure project. I was reviewing the list of addresses slated for demolition in Ohio. I stopped on page 4. My finger hovered over a specific address. It was my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house where my mother had orchestrated my ruin. I immediately called my old foreman in Ohio, who I still kept in touch with occasionally, to ask what the hell was going on. What he told me was a symphony of poetic justice so beautiful it almost brought a tear to my eye. Here is how the Golden Empire crumbled. It turns out, the cancer stunt and the Florida trip were just the tip of the iceberg of my mother's financial insanity. To fund Kevin and Jessica's lavish lifestyle, their extravagant healing vacations, and a $60,000 dream wedding that Kevin insisted on having to prove his status as a successful artist, my mother had secretly taken out massive second mortgages on the house. She had forged my father's signature on several high-interest loans and maxed out dozens of credit cards. Eventually, the house of cards collapsed. The bank came calling. When my father, Arthur, finally discovered that his wife had completely bankrupted him to coddle his deadbeat son, something inside his passive brain finally snapped. For the first time in his life, he stood up to her. He packed his bags, moved into a cheap apartment, and filed for a brutal, unforgiving divorce. Without his income, the house went straight into foreclosure. But the karma didn't stop there. Oh no, the universe saved the best for Kevin and Jessica. Their flawless, artistically connected marriage lasted exactly 8 months. Why? Because Jessica, as it turns out, is fundamentally incapable of keeping her legs closed when she gets bored. She didn't just cheat on Kevin. She cheated on him with his best friend, the same guy who stood right next to Kevin as the best man at their wedding. The cherry on top? She got pregnant. And since Kevin has a documented medical condition that makes him sterile, a fact my mother conveniently kept hidden, there was zero doubt about who the father was. The scandal nuked their lives. Jessica's conservative, upper-middle-class parents disowned her out of sheer embarrassment. Word got around the local school districts about her atrocious moral character, and her teaching contract wasn't renewed. Last I heard, she was living in a dingy trailer park, working the graveyard shift at a customer service call center, raising her affair baby while her new baby daddy sits on the couch playing video games. As for Kevin, the golden child completely shattered. Without my money to steal, my mother's house to live in, or his trophy wife to parade around, reality hit him like a concrete block. He spiraled into heavy alcoholism. He lost whatever part-time jobs he managed to get. He is currently completely broke, homeless, and sleeping on a cot in Aunt Helen's basement, writing depressing poetry that absolutely no one will ever read. And my mother, Martha, the grand manipulator who thought she was a mastermind? With the house foreclosed, her husband gone, and her credit utterly destroyed, she had to face the real world. At 62 years old, having not worked a single day in over 3 decades, she was forced to get a job just to afford a 1-bedroom apartment in a bad part of town. She is currently working 40 hours a week as a greeter at a local Walmart, standing on her feet all day in a blue vest, smiling at strangers. I didn't just read the demolition report. I bought a plane ticket. 2 weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk in my old Ohio neighborhood, wearing my hard hat and high-vis vest. The neighborhood hadn't changed much, but the house looked dead. The lawn was overgrown, the windows were boarded up, and a large red condemned sign was slapped across the front door. I gave the signal to the excavator operator. I stood there with my arms crossed, drinking a cup of coffee, and watched as the massive steel claw tore through the roof of my old bedroom. The room where the betrayal started. The room my mother had proudly handed over to them. I watched the claw rip through the kitchen where she had cooked them dinner, through the living room where she had faked her cancer. I watched the entire structure of lies, favoritism, and toxicity get smashed into a pile of splintered wood and drywall dust. It was the most satisfying cup of coffee I have ever had in my entire life. Part 2.6. The True Happiness of the Steadfast. Target: 800 words. Today, I'm 31 years old. I'm sitting on the back porch of my custom-built home in the Florida suburbs, overlooking a lake. The sun is setting, and the air is warm. I am not alone anymore. A year after the Clara disaster, I met Rebecca. We met at a hardware store of all places. We both reached for the same specific gauge of electrical wire. She's an independent contractor who flips houses. She's tough. She wears steel-toed boots. She speaks her mind, and she takes absolutely zero from anyone. She is my equal in every sense of the word. When things got serious, I told her everything. I laid out the entire ugly history of Ohio, my mother, my brother, Jessica, and the Clara incident. I told her I come with baggage, and my boundaries are made of reinforced titanium. Rebecca didn't cry. She didn't offer me platitudes about family. She just looked me dead in the eye and said, "They sound like absolute parasites. If any of them ever show up on our property, I'm releasing the hounds and calling the cops. Nobody messes with what's mine." I knew right then and there I was going to marry her. And I did. We are currently expecting our first child, a baby boy, due in 2 months. I couldn't be happier. I'm going to be a father, and I am going to raise my son with the values of hard work, accountability, and respect. Everything my family lacked. A few weeks ago, a package arrived at our doorstep. No return address, just a postmark from Ohio. Rebecca opened it cautiously. Inside was a knitted baby blanket, a silver rattle, and a 3-page handwritten letter. I recognized the cursive immediately. It was from Martha. I didn't read it, but Rebecca skimmed it. She scoffed. She says she heard through the grapevine about the baby. She says a child needs its grandmother, that family legacy is everything, and she's willing to forgive the past so she can hold her grandson. Rebecca looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of pity for a woman so delusional that she thought a knitted blanket could buy her way back into a life she tried so hard to destroy. "What do you want to do with it?" Rebecca asked gently. I picked up the box, walked over to the outdoor fire pit where we had been burning some yard debris, and tossed the entire package. Blanket, rattle, letter, and all straight into the flames. I stood there with my arm around my pregnant wife, watching the paper curl and turn to ash, drifting away into the night sky. People always talk about forgiveness. They tell you that holding on to a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But they're wrong. Sometimes, cutting people out of your life completely, ruthlessly, and without apology isn't holding a grudge. It's an act of extreme self-preservation. It's the antidote to the poison. I worked hard for everything I have. My hands are calloused, my back aches, but my conscience is entirely clear. I built my life brick by brick, and I refuse to let anyone tear it down. My brother wanted the easy way out, my mother wanted a puppet, and my ex-fiancée wanted a free ride. In the end, They all got exactly what they deserved. And me? I got everything I ever wanted.